Well, I think also a big part of it is the Cold War was awful. After the fall of the Soviet Union, nobody wanted to hear that it's not over. We're still in a Cold War with China. So I think that was also just people couldn't handle hearing the reality.
Right. And come on, we're at war 20 years in Afghanistan and the war in Iraq, and we had the Soviet thing behind us. And why are you Americans or we Americans always looking for enemies? Why can't we just get along together? Why can't we just have peace through trade? And China's going to reform. The wealthier it becomes, the more democratic and pro-Western it's going to become. That was the party line all these years. Didn't pan out that way, but of course that was never the plan for the party. So we ended up deluding ourselves based on just the power of suggestion from Beijing. And whenever Americans would go to do business or whatever else, diplomacy with China, the line was, look, just help us out, help us advance, and things will turn out okay. So that was the peaceful rise of China. Now to get back to some of the questions you were asking before about the Soviet side of the propaganda, now you have the more aggressive, nasty, threatening side of the Chinese Communist Party that turned on a dime right about the time of the pandemic. So the CCP has become more Soviet-like in being intimidating with its wolf diplomats. And you never had this before, where you'd have diplomats coming out taunting people with snide memes and tweets and all these other things that were never allowed before. And then their ambassador to South Africa and some diplomat someplace else are coming out, and they're actually building up a big following because they're so controversial, and it works as an intimidating factor. So they have become more Soviet-like. In fact, there's a fantastic new study. It's over 600 pages long of Chinese Communist Party influence operations worldwide. It was published in October by the French Armed Forces Ministry, or their defense ministry. It's available in English, and it's a superb study that breaks down the CCP's entire global influence structure and its operations and its methods and how it worked. Everything from not even promoting people who support the CCP, but promoting opponents of the CCP in order to control opposition abroad to the CCP and to divide them and set them against one another. A fascinating study that I'm only partway through it right now, but it's this type of thing that is getting people to pay more attention. So if this kind of product is coming out of the French Defense Ministry, we can imagine that others are going to be paying really close attention to it, because it's not the Americans saying it.
We can put a link to that in the description below so people watching can check it out.
I'm interested in a little bit about the whole controlling the opposition thing that you just talked about.
Well, controlled opposition is a really old political warfare technique. I think the best example was called the Trust. And the Trust was an operation that the Bolsheviks ran in the 1920s. So their 1920s, you've got the Russian Civil War going on. You've got many different factions fighting one another and fighting the Bolsheviks. And the Bolsheviks wanted to crush all of their opposition, but they didn't have a way to do so in the situation that they were in. So most of those factions needed money, they hated other factions, and they needed weapons. So the Bolsheviks funded and armed their own opponents for several years in the 1920s during the Civil War. And they did this so they could identify who was whom in their opposition. Both Russian citizens inside Russia, Soviet Russia, expats who were fighting abroad, and then others like Poles or French or Americans or whoever else, Brits, who were involved in helping them. So by funding their own armed opponents, these guys were actually killing Bolsheviks, but by funding and arming them, the Soviets were able to lure some of their key leaders back to Russia, and then at a certain point had them all killed. Magnificently, it's a sick operation, but if you look at the exquisite way in which it was done, it was brilliant, because that's what saved Bolshevik Russia.
So what I'm hearing from this is that the United States should sell military equipment to China.
I think we've been doing that, but I don't think we had the trust in mind.
So what can the U.S. do about China's influence operations?
Well, I think a lot of it is we really have to clean out their overt institutional groups, like, say, Confucius Centers, Confucius Institutes, which are already being done. Now that people are aware of them and how harmful they are. And it's being done worldwide. But they have to be really run out of every university that receives federal funding. And so the federal government can mandate that, saying, you want federal funds, get rid of these guys. So that's one very important thing, because what those centers do is they, with their language training programs, they serve to indoctrinate those learning Mandarin, but also to scout for talent. Who is the aspiring diplomat? Who's the aspiring businessman or intelligence officer? And how can we target that person and tag that person, identify that person, and then ultimately assess, cultivate, and recruit that person over some course of that person's professional lifetime? So it's a really dangerous system there. I would certainly have reciprocity with CCP media. So if any CCP media operating in the United States must demand reciprocal privileges inside mainland China, and that's not happening. Yeah, ending U.S. investments or in China, let's say public pension funds. So, where, say, the governor of West Virginia, who just went after BlackRock and said, you're not going to handle West Virginia state pension funds anymore. If other state treasurers and state pension funds were able to go to these private fund managers for their state pension systems, and labor unions were to do the same, and others, and say, we're going to cut you off because you're doing business with Communist China and you're putting our own investments at risk, then that would really go a long way to help to prevent CCP companies from entering U.S. capital markets and getting investments, and from being publicly traded on U.S. and other Western stock exchanges, would be a huge help, because it would help dry up funds and show CCP entrepreneurs how their own leadership is damaging their own interests. So these are good steps where we can start. And also to prevent, to enforce federal law, which is where Communist Party members are still, it's a 1930s law, can still be banned from entering the United States. And since so many of the students coming to the United States from mainland China are either party members or are children of party members, the universities like them because they pay in cash, they should be banned from entering on a student visa. Or once they're here, they should not be allowed to be part of research programs that have certain high-tech or military applications that so many of these individuals have been assigned to steal and take back to mainland China. And then crack down on professors like that Harvard chemistry professor who had the laboratory and was getting the secret funding from the CCP without disclosing it to Harvard. There's been a, he was arrested. The FBI had a big investigation of him. He has essentially committed espionage, but not under the laws the way they're written, because it's a different type of spying. It doesn't classify, so they're getting him on other crimes. But these types of cases are very hard to prosecute. That's why that case that you raised earlier about another academic being arrested and then let go, it's very hard to build certain cases for reasons because we have just linguistic and other capabilities that are limited within the FBI. And then our laws haven't kept up with certain spying and illegal influence methods that the Chinese regime has introduced here. So get these types of bad actors out of our research institutions and don't allow them here, and then penalize research institutions that depend on federal funding when they do allow such individuals to occupy sensitive research posts in our institute. So those are just starting points. Then you have members of Congress who are they on the take might be the word, but certainly they have financial interests in appeasing Beijing. There's no shortage of them, Democrat or Republican.
Do you think there's anything the U.S. should not do?
Well, not continue the way it's been going. It has to. Well, Secretary of State Pompeo and Attorney General Barr had it right. So they had an interagency approach to educate the American public, to educate universities, private companies, governors. So you had Pompeo made that speech to the American Governors Association with all 50 state governors and the territorial governors all there, bipartisan, saying, all of you have been targeted by the CCP. You've been targeted personally. You've had psychological assessments run up of you. They know your donors. They know your desires. They know your political standing and your political needs and how to influence you, as well as state legislators and even mayors. But the Chinese Communist Party and the MSS intelligence service are running those deep dive research assessments of our politicians down to the local level to see how can they be manipulated to do what the party wants done, not just on the immediate term, but on the very long term, 10, 20 years out. We're in a lot of trouble. So Pompeo did a great job on this, warning the governors. The FBI did a great job on being repurposed to go after a lot of these networks operating here. And you did have some real bipartisan interest at first, where you had the president of the Senate, I think, of Wisconsin, who was a Democrat, who was given a template resolution to introduce into the Wisconsin legislature, sort of praising China and the Chinese government and the having better relations between the state of Wisconsin and the Chinese government. It was written by the Xi Jinping's consul in Chicago, and it was sent to other states too. Some of the legislation was passed in other states. So these kinds of things we really have to crack down hard on, regardless of who's president or who's in office, because it's something that affects everybody.
Yeah, it truly is a bipartisan issue.
Yeah. What's troubling now is this conflict with Russia and Ukraine is that you see very, very, very few advocates of a robust presence to support Ukraine, which is not an ally. They don't want to talk at all about China and the commitments we have in East Asia, and really arguably the greater importance East Asia has for the United States than a place like Ukraine. I'm very sympathetic toward Ukraine, but Xi Jinping and Putin would like the United States to be involved on two fronts simultaneously, where we don't have the capacity and the physical or even the intellectual bandwidth to deal with two simultaneous conflicts like that.
Well, I think on that note, it's probably about time we wrap up the podcast for today. Thank you for joining us. I found some things to be hopeful about.
Oh, I'm terrified.
Don't worry. American incompetence can't trump the incompetence of communism.
Churchill said something like that, actually.
Yeah. We should put that on a t-shirt. All right. Thanks again for joining us. Yeah, we'll have you on again soon.
Okay. We'll see you.
Take care. So I got to say, I'm very encouraged by everything that was said. I always felt a little sad that I missed the Cold War.
Really?
Yeah, it seemed so exciting, like all the James Bond movies. But fortunately, it never ended, and we're still in a Cold War.
Wow, that's beautiful, Chris.
I know, thank you. Silver lining and all.
I think this is actually worse in a way because we don't know we're in a Cold War.
That's right. Otherwise, James Bond would be fighting China more.
That's never going to happen.
It's never, ever going to happen.
They changed, what was that one? The Red
Dawn
to North Korea. That's just never going to happen. Yeah.
Yeah.
Unless somehow Hollywood gets really burned by the Chinese Communist Party.
It would need to be like Mike was saying, like how Chinese billionaires are getting burned.
Mm-hmm.
If this cascades down the line, then maybe at some point Hollywood will be like, well, you know what? Hollywood is like a jealous lover, once scorned. You don't want to deal with that.
Okay.
Mm. Yeah, no, the latest James Bond movie, there was a piece related to a disputed island, but it was between Russia and Japan. And I was thinking while watching it, if they had set this on a disputed island in the South China Sea, now that would have been interesting.
Or the disputed island between Japan and China.
Or between the U.S. and Canada.
Is that disputed?
It's not important.
Well, the lesson is tell your friends and family the Cold War never ended.
Oh my gosh.
That was loud. But you got to say it loud.
You have to. Maybe with a crazed look in your eye so they know it's serious.
Definitely. Are you sure you're a communication professional?
I never made that claim.
That's good.